Hi everyone, thank you for joining me this evening. This is the first of our new live streams and I'm calling this series Hot Topics. The idea is that we will have a new topic each month and it's open to everybody and we're just going to focus on that one topic each time. So if you have suggestions of what you'd like me to talk about in our Hot Topics on the third Monday of the month, then please drop them in the chat. So I will try to choose one of those for each month and talk about those. And then at the end, when I've talked, I will take a look at your questions or your comments and do my best to respond to those as well. So obviously, I haven't had a chance to get some ideas from you yet. So I've come up with this month's topic all on my own. And today I'm planning to talk about listening to your dog. And the reason for that is that there's been so much going on recently in the UK about dangerous dogs. And this, I think, has come about from there being a number of attacks recently in quite a short space of time, mostly involving XL bully dogs, including one where the person actually died. And clearly something has gone terribly, terribly wrong with these dogs, whether it's from their breeding or whether it's from their upbringing, we don't know. But the government in the UK has announced that they're going to ban this breed from the end of this year. And this seems to have caused as much consternation as the news of the attacks has. So one of the issues that became clear when the Dangerous Dogs Act was introduced in the UK, which banned 4 specific breeds, is that it's not necessarily a dog's breed that's the problem. In fact, if you look at the statistics, one of the dogs in the top 3 dogs for causing bites is the Chihuahua. So it's not even about a dog's size. But the difference is with these dogs that are banned is that they are breeds with the sort of jaw and mouth that can do a lot more damage than a Chihuahua can. If it was based just on how many times they bite, then we wouldn't be allowed to have Chihuahuas. But if it's looking at how much damage they can do, it becomes a different matter. So while they are of a certain breed and have particular ancestors in their heritage, it can make an individual dog more dangerous, but any dog can bite if provoked. And if we provoke them enough, eventually they will reach the point where they can't cope anymore and they have to respond. And I think in a way, if you think about it, all dogs generally have a mouthful of pretty sharp teeth if we take out those greyhounds who have had a lot of their teeth removed for one reason or another. And they could choose to bite if they wanted to. So what to me is actually more amazing is that they don't bite that often. They demonstrate a huge amount of self-control so that they don't bite even if they're provoked. And you often have to push them really quite hard to get a greyhound to bite. And I think as owners, it's important that we take steps to understand our dogs and respect their wishes where possible. I often feel sad when I see things online showing people that are using really quite outdated training methods, or they're punishing a dog for expressing an opinion. After all, we don't enjoy everything that happens to us. And someone can explain to us why that's happening. You know, if I go to the dentist, I might want to smack him because I really don't want him to do that. But I lay there and put up with it because I know it has to be done. And it's kind of hard to explain that to a dog. So we're expecting them to put up with things that they don't necessarily understand why this is happening. And we expect them to just tolerate that. And a classic example of this is growling. I live with multiple dogs and I get a lot of minor growling, grumbling going on. So I'm not talking about serious growling that's going to end up resulting in a warning from the dog, but more low-level muttering. And it doesn't mean my dogs don't get on. It just means they're communicating. And I'm hoping that I'll get to the end of this live stream without having a demonstration on that for you, because my lot are currently settled down, but Gandalf in particular is prone to having a good old grumble for no apparent reason. And he does like to demonstrate this for me at what he considers to be an appropriate moment, which is not always what I consider to be an appropriate moment. So if there's any grumbling in the background, it's almost certainly Gandalf that is doing the demonstration for you. So hopefully you have more civilized dogs than I do, and ones with fewer issues than I do. But this is still about communication. And last week, on the second Monday of the month, I do a live stream for members who have joined as a super fan. So each month they choose a subject and we have a quite in-depth discussion. And last week we talked about canine communication in really quite a lot of detail, and looked at some of the subtle signals that dogs may give, which, if ignored, can cause them to escalate to give you a much more serious message. So it's a bit like if I say to you, excuse me, can you pass me that book? And you ignore me completely. And I might say, excuse me, can you pass me the book, please? And you still ignore me. And then I'm going to say, oi, I need the book now. So you escalate, you say it more forcefully. And if dogs give us these very subtle signals in their communication and we listen, they don't need to say anything more loudly or say anything more forcefully because we've listened. But if we don't take that into account, they may feel the need to say something a bit more loudly. So if we learn about those subtle signals and we respond to them, then we can take into account what the dog would prefer us to do and take into account their feelings on the matter. And it may well be that things don't need to escalate. So if one of mine is lying on their bed and another one comes walking past, they might ignore them completely, or they might grumble. Now, Gandalf in particular is likely to grumble if any dog comes near him. When he first moved in with me, he had the most appalling sleep startle I have ever seen in a Greyhound. In his previous home, he had 3 attempts at homing before he came to me. And at that last one, he was in their living room and he was just lying down, apparently sleeping, and someone went to walk into the room. He was on the far side of the room. They went to walk into the room. And apparently, I'm told, he launched himself across the room, leapt at them and tried to bite their face. So his sleep startle was just off the scale. He could not deal with anyone coming anywhere near him when he was asleep. And when he first moved in, we were very, very cautious about going anywhere near that dog when he was lying down. And my other dogs had to learn how we were managing that. And there were some incidences where my other dogs got growled at or worse. And they have all learnt to be very wary of him when he's lying down. Now, it's been a long time since he ever did anything worse than just grumble at one of them, but they still are very wary of going past him when he's lying down, and for good reason. But provided they listen to him and they respect his wishes, it doesn't go any further than that. So if they are lying next to you on the sofa and you sit down or you wriggle and the sofa moves, and perhaps they have an achy joint or an ouchy muscle and that's uncomfortable, then they're likely to grumble at you. And that would be the same if you were doing that with another person. You know, maybe you were sitting with a cup of tea or coffee on the sofa and someone sits next to you and the sofa moves and it jiggles your coffee and you spill some on your trousers and it's hot and you say, yeah, that hurt. Then the next time that person comes near you to sit on the sofa, you might say, well, actually, watch out. Last time I got my leg burnt because you spilt my coffee. So just be careful. And so you warn them in advance. And we see that same difference or that same escalation with our dogs. So they might start off, if you come near them, you sit down and they don't say anything. And maybe it was uncomfortable. And the next time you come near them, they grumble. And if you ignore that, next time they come near you, they may well say something a bit louder. Because what they've learned is that when you do whatever that thing is, sitting on the sofa in this case, they've learned that it's not necessarily a good thing for them. So it prompts them to take some action to prevent it from happening. So they're anticipating something happening and they're getting in first with a warning. So this is no different from how you would behave if you wanted to warn someone. And if they growl, they're just giving us a gentle reminder that they're there, so we don't sit on them. And they have these two options. They can either ignore it or they can respond more forcefully. And that really depends on the dog's personality as what they choose to do. But I think with any dog, if you push them far enough, they're going to respond. There's one dog that I know of who was in a situation where the police were involved because he had bitten the child in the house. Now, he was moved out of that house and he moved into a foster home. And it's turned out that he is the sweetest, kindest dog that you could ever ask for. But in that household, with the busyness and the comings and goings, he just did not cope. And he was pushed so far, despite the huge amount of tolerance that he normally shows. He was so stressed, he was pushed so far that he snapped. And unfortunately, he caught the child and bit them. So a lot of it is down to circumstances. And you wonder how much he had tolerated, how many warning signals he had put out there, how many requests for things to stop or to change, but they weren't seen because people didn't realize that that was what was happening. So you might have a dog that grumbles at you when they're sleeping on the bed at night, and they might be quite happy snoozing away, and then you move and you fidget in the night, you turn over and they grumble at you. So that is not necessarily sleep startle, but more a reminder that they're there. And your wriggling is disturbing the dog. So they're just saying, look out, I'm here, don't disturb me. But then you might have a different situation where you're fully aware of what's going on and the dog isn't. So if you're sitting on the sofa and you have the dog on a bed down beside you, then the dog might be fast asleep and you might just trail your arm over the side of the sofa. Your hand might reach down to stroke the dog. You know that's going to happen, but the dog doesn't, and the dog is fast asleep at the time. So for them, there's just this sudden touch. And greyhounds are not used to being touched when they're asleep. You can't touch a greyhound when they're asleep, when they live in a kennel, because by the time you've walked down the walkway, you've rattled some doors, you've got to undo the bolt to their kennel and so on and got in, they're wide awake. And even if that dog wasn't awake at the start, all the others barking for attention will wake them up. So the first time they get touched when they're, or potentially touched when they're asleep, is going to be when they're in a home. And given that they've never been used to that since puppyhood, it's not surprising that they might leap up in a panic, they might growl and they might snap, because this idea of being touched by another person, by human, just is not part of their world when they are in a kennel environment. And I do wonder whether greyhounds growl so much, whether they are so growly, because they spend so much time around other dogs when they are young. So if you think about it, a greyhound born into a racing environment, they will spend the first year of their life with their litter, with their mom, with their brothers and sisters. And dogs communicate by body language and by sound, same as we do. Just the sounds are not language in our terms, but it's still a language to them. So they have this vocal communication, and growling is part of that. So they're used to grumbling at each other, just in the same way that if you have human brothers and sisters, they might grumble at each other. So if a dog is honed when they're only a pup, because they're born and bred to be a pet, they go home at 8 weeks, and their learning about doggy communication will depend on how much socializing they have with people and how much socializing they have with other dogs. And depending on how their owners and visitors and other family members respond to their growling, they may grow up with a different response to the idea of growling. They may not grow up with growling being considered as acceptable towards humans, as one greyhound may consider it to be acceptable towards another greyhound. Because to the dog, it isn't necessarily a case that they're saying something aggressive. They're just saying, I'd rather you didn't do that. And then, of course, we have two ways that it can go, depending on how you respond. So it's your response or the other dog's response that's important. If the other dog or the person listens to the growl and they respond appropriately by saying, I hear you, I'll move away, the matter is resolved. If instead they say, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway, then you get a problem. And this is often what happens. So maybe the dog has given some very subtle warning signs and the person or the other dog ignores them. And that dog is not the most tolerant of dogs, or they've been pushed as far as they can cope with going, or maybe it's painful, or they're wound up because of things that had happened earlier in the day or over the last week or something. And they turn around and they say, you know what, I can't take this today. So they go from that growl of warning to a snap. And it's just the same, as I said, as with children. If you've got siblings, maybe they have a bit of a discussion about who's having this toy or who took that toy or who had the last packet of crisps or whatever it is they're discussing. And one of them is potentially going to take it too far and upset the other one. And this is really no different. They just don't always get on. And I think that's fair enough. It would be a miracle if they did all get on all the time, to be fair. Just as humans don't get on all the time. So sometimes we can have slightly different perspectives on what is going on. And dogs, no, they're not people, they're dogs, but they do have emotions. We know that they have very similar style of emotions as people do. They have the same structures in the brain, the same emotions can be detected in a whole range of different animals. And if they're going to have the emotions, they're going to express the emotions. And if we pay a little bit of attention to what they're saying, it can go a long way towards having a better understanding of each other. So let's have a look at the chat. Who is here today? We've got David says hi. Mr. Piggy. Oh, I like that name. Mr. Piggy says hi. Tracy and I are here. Pam says hello. The Sloan Ranger says, hi campers. And Yehuva's a member, and Yehuva has this lovely little icon that we did. Says, suggestions in the live stream help me already with my dog. That's great to hear. Thank you very much. And David says he listens to his dog. All he says is biscuit, biscuit, biscuit. Yeah, Floppy's a bit like that. All he seems to say is food, food, food. Give me more food. What different food have you got? Is it always biscuits, David, or does he like other things? With Floppy, he's discovered fruit. I don't know why. If you watched his video for his 6 months, he's discovered the wonders of bananas, and he's very happy to stand and watch me now and then have the last of my banana. He also likes apples, and I've now discovered he likes peaches as well. So he seems to have a bit of a sweet tooth when it comes to fruit. And I do remember there was one dog I worked with, his favorite thing was carrots. And you could take him meaty treats, dried meat, biscuits, all sorts of things. But the thing that he really wanted was carrots. And that always surprised me, that the most exciting thing you could give this dog was a carrot. And Flop is a little bit that way. So Aurora Violet Light says, just in from work, but watching as I can. Thank you very much for being here. And Julie says, my hound Pesto loves bananas. They do like bananas. I'm going to do some more treats for them with bananas. And I also sometimes, if I've got a really ripe one, I put them on licky mats. I'm not a fan of ripe bananas. I like my ripe bananas a bit green. So if they get a bit brown and banana smelling, I save them for the dogs. And sometimes I mash them up into a licky mat, which seems to be quite popular. And David says some of them love watermelon. I've not tried watermelon. That's an interesting one to try. Might have to give that a go. Is that in chunks or mashed, or what do you do with your watermelon? And Yehuva says, our dog loves a licky mat with banana and apple puree. Yes, apples I find sometimes they like, sometimes they don't. We went through a phase of them all wanting to help me eat my apples, but now they're not quite so keen on apples. I don't know why. Why apples have become less exciting. And David said, where's Floppy? Floppy is in his crate because I don't trust him to be well behaved with me in the other room. He's not allowed in this room yet. There's a whole series of baby gates between me and Floppy right now. But he is in the other room in his crate with his music playing, which is his cue to be quiet for a bit. And he's remarkably good about sitting in there. I put his music on and I shut him in, and he generally stays there quietly. The problem happens is if I leave him loose and he gets bored, and then he starts bouncing around, and I start worrying if he's going to pee on something. And then I find it very hard to concentrate on what I'm doing if I'm worried about him peeing on something. So if he sits in his crate, I can concentrate a bit more easily. So David now says that the watermelon, I guess it is just in small chunks. Okay, we shall have to give that a try if we manage to get our hands on some watermelon. Yeah, I think just following down the chat here, trying not to get too far ahead of myself. So Clapperjack says hello from Germany. And then going back to David again, he says he, as in Floppy, took over with me in the shed. Yeah, he almost embodies some of Daisy's qualities. We lost Daisy back in the spring, and Floppy came not much after that. And none of the others were really that keen. There's a little batch of videos I made where I was really struggling to get a dog to help me out because they would all rather be doing something else. Maggie gets very bored if I'm in the shed. She has a poke around at the other stuff and then wanders off. Gandalf and Jimmy would much rather play, so I find they wander in and out. And AJ's a bit camera shy. He finds the whole thing a bit embarrassing. He's more of a behind the scenes kind of guy. So none of them really wanted to help. And then, of course, along comes Floppy and he's like, yay, here I am. I want to sit on that bench. I've had that seat in that shed for maybe it's 23, isn't it? Easily 20 years that seat has been in that shed. And none of my greyhounds up till now have ever wanted to sit on that seat. They try and sit on things in the house, but they don't want to sit on that bench in the shed. And along comes Floppy, and suddenly he wants to sit on the bench in the shed. So it only seemed fair that he should take over helping with the videos, because it's kind of more fun with the dog there when you're talking about dogs. And the rest of them get to stay indoors, or they get to play in the garden and do what they want to do. Jim being the most annoying because he comes and steals things and bounces up and down and barks, and then I have to stop and reshoot things multiple times because of what Jim's been getting up to. But apart from that, he's remarkably good. He knows when I'm going to go and film stuff, and he wanders off down the garden and I'm setting up and he gets himself on the bench so I can use him to set up the camera and focus it and everything. And then he sits there quite happily while I video. So he's a very good assistant in that respect. And yes, the old Get What Games says that's because he's usually peed somewhere. He does pee in the shed as well. He hasn't peed in the shed for a while, but he likes to pee up the stuff that's outside the shed. So we're working on that. You can't leave anything anywhere else he pees on it, let's face it. And David says, what was the hardest part of having a dog is saying goodbye? Yes, it is. I've had to do it a fair few times and work on focusing on moving forwards, because ultimately you've done your best for that dog. And there's an awful lot of other dogs out there who need help as well. So I try and console myself with that. And Aurora Violet Sight says, hear about the peeing. My new dog is like Floppy that way, but not a greyhound. Work in progress. Yes, it is definitely a work in progress. And I think the work in progress is for you as well as for the dog, because I don't know that I trust Floppy to be in here. He might be fine, but the last time he was in here, he peed everywhere, and I don't want to have to spend my time clearing it up, so he doesn't come in. And he's actually learnt that he's not allowed in. So if I open the baby gate to this room, the others come in and he doesn't even try. And it's easier to just leave it like that, to be honest, because else I wouldn't get to sit on here on my own, because he would need to sit on here with me. Floppy has the most adorable ears. And Floppy is the best sidekick. Yes, he is the best sidekick. The ads are a Facebook thing, David. I don't really know that much about the ads. I don't know. I take it they're putting ads in as it goes along then. That's interesting. I will have to look at the settings and see what I can do. I'm not sufficiently au fait with the settings on that to know how that works. I'll have a look. So thinking about what I've been talking about today, does anyone have any questions about growling? Have people found that their dogs have been growling at them, or a dog started growling after you'd had them for a few months, or growled at first and then stopped? Have people had experience of their dogs growling over the years, either with people or with other dogs? Anything related to that? Or sleep startle? Anybody had any issues? The 4 breeds of dangerous dog. Yeah, I know I should have checked that out before I started this. I can't remember. The pit bull is the only one that really works, in that it's a bit strange. The Dangerous Dogs Act set out to ban these 4 breeds. And if you look at the Dangerous Dogs Act or the equivalent in different countries ban different breeds. So it's not the case of this one breed is banned in every country. I mean, in America, there are loads of pit bulls. In the UK, they're banned. But the only one that they can really enforce is the pit bull, because in the UK, what they say is it's pit bull type. And that means they have basically analysed the dog in terms of bone length and size and girth and height and weight and all sorts of features. So essentially what happens is if there's an incident, then they will seize the dog and they will measure it, basically. And if it fits the measurements that are deemed to be pit bull type, then that dog will have some repercussions. It might be put to sleep, it might be released like on a license, so the person has to muzzle it, keep it on lead and so on, and they have to stick to the requirements. That is the only one of the 4 where that has been set in place. So the other 3, they just name them, but they haven't actually got a proper definition. So one of the problems that they're going to have if they want to ban XL bullies, as far as I understand it, is that an XL bully is not a definable breed. It's not a kennel club breed. I think, if I remember correctly, it may even be a cross. So how are they going to decide what dog is an XL bully? They're going to have the same problem as they have with pit bull type. So the problem that you get is that if the dog happens to have those physical characteristics, then it would be classed as a banned dog, but it says nothing about its temperament, and it's down to if something happens that an individual dog gets seized and then it's investigated. So it's one of the reasons that people are against the Dangerous Dogs Act. I don't think people are against the idea that dangerous dogs should not be acceptable, but having an act that says because it has this size, shape, weight, appearance does not necessarily make that dog aggressive, because it isn't just the appearance of the dog that matters. It's its mentality that matters, and quite a lot of that will relate to its breeding, but it will also relate to how it's been treated and what it's been encouraged to do. So it's quite an awkward area. And at the moment, in terms of training, I know that there are a lot of companies who insure people to train dogs who are saying that once breed is banned, you won't be insured to train it. So there's again a problem in that people who have a dog of that breed may be asked to do various things to prove that it's under control, but you won't be able to hire a trainer to help you because they're not insured to work with that breed because it's banned. So there's a lot of loopholes that will need to be addressed. Let's go back to the chat. So Yehuba says ours grumbles a lot and quite frequently. I think some of them are just very chatty. They just naturally talk to themselves. Yeah, just mutter away. I mean, mine kind of mutter to themselves. Daisy used to be forever muttering to herself if her bed wasn't right. Maggie's always saying, open this gate, shut that gate, where's my breakfast? You know, if she wants something, she will tell me, very much tell me. Are greyhounds one? I don't understand. You'll have to elaborate on that one, please. Are greyhounds one what? Aurora Violet Light says, my new dog warned me when I was going to trim his feet, but he didn't growl. I took the warning and we're leaving that for another time. He really is doing his best. Yeah, with the rescue, it's so hard because he could have had a beautiful life before, and the people who had him before had to let him go for no reason to do with the dog. But we just don't know. We just don't know what has happened to them before. And with any dog, I think it's really important to respect their wishes. So that's to do with his feet. I have similar things when it comes to teeth. So I've been very, very lucky with Floppy's teeth. He is happy to have the teeth scraped for me to flip the tartar off. But he was very wary of having them brushed. And it took 3 months before he could have them brushed. So every night when I did the other dogs, he would see me doing it and he'd be quite interested. And he would maybe sniff the brush. But if I tried to put it near his mouth, no. And he'd walk away. So I just left it. And I tried offering him the toothpaste. And it actually changed when I changed from a toothpaste to a tooth gel. I don't know why, but suddenly it was okay. And we had this kind of light bulb moment. And from then on, he's been quite happy for me to brush his teeth. But if I had persevered and insisted on him brushing his teeth in those first 3 months, he might have learned to resist quite fiercely. And if wriggling didn't get him away from me, he might have escalated to growling. Now, Jim is very fond of that. He is a really anxious, spooky dog, but he is not averse to warning you if he doesn't like something by growling at you. So he has progressed over a few months after he came to having his teeth brushed. So I can brush down the sides, but I can't brush the front ones, which is frustrating because he's got a teeny bit of gum recession and the food gets stuck between the front ones, the little incisors at the top. And I desperately want to brush the food out, but he won't let me. And if I try to put the brush onto those front teeth, he will growl. So we don't. I just put a bit of tooth gel on and hope for the best and hope that we will work up to it. But he's quite happy for me to brush the ones down the side. So we do what we can. And if he growls, I listen and I stop. Because if I don't, long term, it's only going to get worse. Pushing him to have it done despite the growling is not going to get us into a better place where he trusts me to do his teeth for him. And it's more important longer term that I can have that trust with him. So Mr. Piggy says, when I'm out with my two, I notice other dogs bark at them, then it starts Joe off. I'm guessing Joe is one of the dogs. Yeah, it's quite common that they will respond. It's a bit like if someone shouted an insult at you across the road, you might shout back. Sometimes it can start with just a glare. If they glare at like the other dogs eyeballing them in the wrong way. I find the breeds that are herding dogs that work by eye, such as collies, are really bad with that. And the breeds that are a bit up for trouble, like terriers, some terriers, they stare at your greyhound, and greyhounds, I find, generally consider eye contact as a little bit rude. So they stare at your greyhound, and your greyhound says, "How rude, how dare you stare at me?" And they'll say something back. So they might growl, they might glare, they might be shy and they might turn away. But if the other dog is rude enough to shout at them, which is not the politest thing to do, then yeah, they shout back. And I don't see why they shouldn't really. So Pam says we had sleep startle with William, but he's grown out of it. Yeah, in Pam's experience, it takes time. I think sleep startle can often be made much worse if they're feeling stressed. I think that's a bit of a no-brainer, really. If you're likely to be disturbed and wake up a bit disorientated and start growling or grumbling, then if you're anxious, it's going to make it worse. So when a dog first moves home, then if they are prone to sleep startle, they are likely to be worse than when they feel settled in that environment. And with humans, in fact, they know that if you go to stay in a hotel for the night, however wonderful and luxurious the hotel, typically that first night or first couple of nights, maybe even in the hotel, you do not sleep as well as you would at home, because it's not the usual place and there's an element of feeling unsettled, and that makes you sleep lighter or maybe not very well at all. And I think that has been part of Gandalf's process as he has gradually settled and become comfortable here and felt safe here. His anxiety levels are reduced, and therefore his sleep startle is much improved. So yes, it can take time for them to settle in. Thank you very much, the old Get What Games. I know it was the Japanese Tozer. It was the other two I couldn't quite remember. So the Dogo Argentino and the Fila Brasileiro. But those three are not fully defined, which is the problem I was saying about if you had one of those, how would they prove it was one of those? Unless you had papers saying it was one of those, they would struggle to prove it. And this is going to be the issue with the XL bullies. But if you look at the equivalent act for different countries, you will find they have different breeds listed and different numbers of breeds. So there is no consistency between countries as to which dogs are considered dangerous, which also says to me there's an awful lot about nurture as well as nature there, because if it was just nature, their breeding, then the pit bull would be dangerous in any country. The fact that it varies from country to country has to say a lot about how they're brought up. So Denise says, I'm glad my greyhounds offer a little growl when they're unhappy. I appreciate the warning. And nothing has ever escalated beyond a grumble. Thank you for your videos and greyhound love from Florida. Thank you, Denise. I definitely like the growl. The problem that you can have, now Gandalf's thinking he's going to join in. The problem that you can have if they don't growl is the growl is the warning that the dog may escalate to something else. If you ignore it, they learn that there's no point and they just go for the something else. So a dog that bites without warning, and I put that in speech marks because when people say that, there usually has been a warning and they either haven't recognized it or with time it's been ignored and the dog has learned there is no point growling, they're going to ignore me anyway, what the hell, I'll just bite. So the dog that goes straight for the bite at some point has been ignored when they have given warnings. And it might not have been by you, it might have happened in a previous existence, when they were still in kennels with a previous owner, in the rescue kennel, whatever. But they have at some point learned there was no point in growling. And so the growl is actually really valuable as a warning. So, if you're sitting on the sofa with your dog and you're nice and comfy and they growl, I would say, okay, what's going on here? What was the problem? And you can usually hear the difference between a bit of a grumble about you disturb me as opposed to you don't do that. And I would listen. I mean, yes, it may not be acceptable for them to try to say, don't do that in that situation. But if you come in heavy-handed and say, don't you dare, then you are likely to have confrontation and have problems. You can look at different ways to manage the situation so that they are not put in the position where they feel they want to assert themselves in that manner. And that is a much safer way to go about it than basically confronting them over it. So where were we? That was Denise in Florida. Pam says, I think the problem is the type of owner that is attracted to these dogs. We should ban them. The owners or the dogs, Pam? I think there is a big issue with some breeds being considered as status symbols and representative of a certain perhaps lifestyle, or maybe being acquired for protection or used for protection. There are whole sports now around protection. I can't remember the name of it, but there are sports where people actually train dogs to, you know, latch on to those big sleeves and pull people down and so on. And I think you're on a kind of slippery slope, because you've got to be able to have an amazing degree of trust in the dog to do what you tell it to do at a distance at all times. And as anyone who has a greyhound that gets feisty around squirrels, cats, or other dogs knows, sometimes those instincts are stronger than we are, and the dog may just flick into that mode and get on with it, which is probably what has happened in these attacks that have been in the news recently in the UK. There was another one yesterday I saw, 2 people in Staffordshire attacked in hospital. I didn't see any more than that, but they seem to be coming thick and fast at the moment, which is quite scary. So Chris Armstrong, who's also a member, yay, thank you, Chris, says, our grey Hubble doesn't growl, or I've never heard her. However, she does do a grumble. Yeah, maybe she just is too polite to feel she needs to growl. The grumble is a bit like you kind of saying, "Oi, budge up a bit," or "Don't do this." I think we know when it escalates, you can hear they start sounding a bit more serious. But that's really sweet if she doesn't feel she needs to growl. I'm not sure Meggie growls, actually. And some greyhounds are so polite that they wouldn't say boo to a goose, bless them. So you got a sweet one. I don't know whether mine are perhaps a bit more grumbly because, like I said, you know, it's something they have in their first year when they're living with their litter mates, you know, that sort of squabbling amongst the siblings. And whether because I have multiple dogs that they talk to each other more. Sometimes they say, okay, I won't, and other times they're like, oh, for goodness sake. Like Jim gets so grumpy about food. When I'm putting the meals together, he will stand and protect it. He can cope with it if I'm in the room, but if I have to leave the kitchen, he gets really grouchy, grumbling, and possibly even trying to snap at Floppy, who wants to stand near it. And Floppy just rolls his eyes. Oh, here we go again. He's off again. He won't get any more food. He won't get it any quicker, but he just cannot cope with it being there. And he grumbles and snaps away. Julie Fout says, ours whimpers when he sees other dogs sometimes. That could be a little bit of excitement, frustration, interest, a kind of a happy noise, or it could be a worried noise. You'd have to kind of look at the rest of his body language to figure that one out, I think. Meggie kind of mutters a bit to herself in that sort of way when we see a cat, which is about as far as she gets with prey drive on walks. But it's that same sort of thing. It's just like an element of, oh, that's interesting, talking to themselves. And as I say, it could be either way, but it is possibly some degree of excitement or a positive thing. The Sloan Ranger says, my greyhound doesn't grumble, but he will let out a big sigh if I'm slow in fixing his bed. Yes, I know that sigh. I get that a lot. And if you don't fix it just right, you're going to get an even bigger sigh, aren't you? They're just so demanding. I've lost track of myself. Where am I? Yeah. And you know, you fix the bed and it's not right, so they then trash it and they don't trash it properly, so you have to fix it again. Yeah, I get that a lot. I spend a lot of time with that. Aurora Violet Light says, Jill, teeth again, like Floppy, will go slowly and try things gently. Yeah, I would start with just, do you like the taste of this toothpaste? Would you like to eat some toothpaste today? And work up from there. And the old Get What Game says, Pip yes, she hated collies with a vengeance. She was fine with other breeds, but she could not stand collies. And I put that down to the fact that they stared at her because she didn't like being stared at. And collies do have a habit of staring. It's what they're bred for. It's called eye stalking. And sounds a bit rude, really. But yeah, they do tend to stare. It's how they move the sheep. Julie says, Pesto loves his teeth being cleaned. Oh, well, way to go, Pesto. When we first tried him, he didn't know what to do with a dentist stick. He now loves them. And that was all of a sudden. Guess he wasn't given anything to chew before. He might not have been given that sort of thing to chew. Quite a lot of ex-racing greyhounds will have had bones when they were racing. Cow femur, the thigh bone. So he may well not have been given anything that you had to buy from a pet shop, but more things that came from the butchers, if anything. Yes, Susie says Huskies and Collies, big starers. I think the Huskies are almost worse because they have those pale eyes and you can really see what the pupils are doing, which direction they're staring. But any of the breeds that stare, I find greyhounds can find disconcerting. And I notice mine will either square up to them and tell them off, or they will be quite upset and move away. And it can go either way. No, Gandalf is not appearing, I hope. I think he's in bed behind me. Back there, and I hope he stays there. Mr. Piggy says, does anyone have a greyhound that huffs at you? Does anyone have a greyhound that huffs? I have been huffed at by some of mine. AJ's a bit of a huffer. Yeah, it's a funny little noise, isn't it? Like they're almost laughing at you. So let us know if you have a greyhound that huffs. Drop that in the comments. And Susie says, my lad doesn't growl at humans. He goes right for the bite. So that's taken a... Yes. Yeah, bless him. If he was returned twice before for biting his humans, then he may have growled at them. I don't know if you know. It's possibly growled at them and they ignored it or told him off for doing it. And he learned there was no point in growling. There probably is a tell, bit like with poker, you know, there'll be a tell, something he does before it's going to happen, which if you watch carefully, you can often pick up on. But management is usually the safest way forward to reduce the number of times the situation occurs where he feels the need to do it. Because the more he practices it, the more he feels he's in situations where he needs to do it, the more he's going to do it. It's going to become more second nature. So I find you have to unpick it back from that to try and reduce the opportunities or the situations where he feels pushed to do it in the first place. And Yehuda says, ours burps at us. You unintentionally trained him to do that after his dinner. Intriguing. I'd never known of someone training their dogs to burp. But I do remember vaguely that burping is also a form of communication. So it could be related to that. Denise says, is that what it is? My mate Gray's weird about collies. And yeah. I don't think it will be the ears, Denise, that makes them the sticky uppy puppy ears. I don't think it will be the ears that upsets them specifically, but the staring is a big thing. On the whole, I find some greyhounds are really in your face and let me love you. Daisy was a great one for staring at you with googly eyes. Floppy's a bit that way. Others really, really get upset about eye contact. So if you have one that finds eye contact challenging, then if another dog stares at them, which breeds like Huskies and Collies and some terriers, I find, do, then they are going to find that threatening. So they might either want to move away from them or they might want to tell them to get lost. It can go either way. The eye contact is a big thing. And I do think it's particularly bad with greyhounds. I think they consider eye contact quite rude. Starey, full-on eye contact is quite challenging for any breed of dog. Staring straight in the eye would be considered a threat, suggesting that they are prepared to escalate their behaviour into something more challenging should you wish to take them on. So if a dog is staring at you, the best thing to do is to turn away, because it could potentially go badly if you stare back. I find this whole thing that you sometimes see on social media where people are saying they stared the dog down is actually quite a risky thing to do, depending on the dog. If it's a greyhound, if it comes to telling the dog off, then just looking them in the eye with starey eyes can be sufficient. But if you have a dog that is up to take on the challenge, or a breed of dog that is very much prepared to leap into the challenge rather than one that is less unassuming than a greyhound, then you can quite easily find that staring them in the eye will cause them to attack you. So generally, if you want to keep the peace, I would not stare a dog in the eye, unless the dog is offering a soft eye contact first. So David had 2 dogs that huffed, and you huffed back. Yes, I've huffed back. And Pam's Rosie blows her lips in little ripples. Sweet, that's sweet. She burps in your face. Yeah, that's particularly grim when they do that, when they burp in your face. Yeah, it's not very nice. And Gandalf likes to do it when he's been eating much worse things than fish. David says, I admire you for the effort you put into helping these dogs. Thank you, David. And another one that burps, that guests. And Clapperzak says, I really appreciate this new format. It's really helpful. Thank you. Thank you. And Chris reckons that burping is just the result of wolfing her dinner down as fast as possible. It could well be, because we do the same. You do tend to swallow air when you eat too fast, and that's what causes you to burp. So Clapperzak said, he or she, I'm not sure, they appreciate this new format. If you have suggestions of what we might talk about next month, or what you'd like me to talk about next month before we chat in the comments, then you could pop them up here now, or more usefully, pop back to the post either in the community group or add them to the comments where I shared this before, so I can find your suggestions, and then I'm going to just draw up a list. I think next time we did have a suggestion from Serendipity Faye, who I haven't seen in the comments here today, but she may well be here. A suggestion to talk about greyhound clothing. So unless I get a more topical suggestion, I may pick up that one for next month, because as we're moving into the winter here in the UK, then warm clothing is relevant. And obviously moving into warmer months in other parts of the country, then cooler clothing. And also talking about temperature and how to tell if they're hot or cold. And the Sloan's Ranger says you like the live stream too. Thank you. Thank you. I'm hoping to do this one once a month and just see how it goes. And then, sorry, I'm trying to read my notes and look at the comments at the same time. It gets quite challenging to multitask. Gandalf could be Derek Doglander again. I don't know if I have more outfits. We'll have to try some things on, and he could model. Yes, but he won't be doing it in the live stream, because you know what he's like. He doesn't. And I told them they got the afternoon off or the evening off for the live stream. So he's not going to play, is he, for the live stream? But he could do another video on it. So if you have enjoyed this month's live stream and would like to get more involved with the channel, do consider becoming a channel member. There are 3 levels to choose from and they have different perks. So where you could see people have got little paw prints in different colors in here, they are members. And there are also emojis that you can use as a member in the live stream, which are special to you. And if you join at the highest level, which is the super fan level, then you get a live stream on the second Monday of the month as well, which we go into more depth than we've done in the main subject today. So you will get more live streams that way. And I'm also planning from January, build up gradually, that we will have a live stream on the 4th Monday of the month that will be for all members. So there's always going to be this one once a month for everybody, but there will be more live streams as well for members of the channel as well. So the link is in the description if you're interested in joining. And I'm going to call that a day for this evening and go and have my dinner. And Aurora Violet Flight has ordered the planner. Fantastic. Thank you so much. We need to sell lots of copies of the planner to keep Floppy in treats because there are so many squirrels around at the moment. We get through a lot of treats on a walk practicing with those squirrels. And Yehuva's found the logo. I'm not quite sure how you use the emojis, so well done for finding that out. And Gandalf is definitely not working for overtime. I have trouble getting him to work for any time at the moment. I think he's on a bit of strike at the moment. So we'll have to inspire him with something exciting. He had a bit of a party coming up, so we'll see how he gets on with that. So I'm going to wish you a very good morning, evening, lunchtime, whatever it happens to be where you are. And thank you very much again for joining me today. And we will be back next time for our talk on Greyhound clothing on the 3rd Monday in November, unless someone comes up with a better idea for me. So pop your suggestions in the comments, please. And Chris is going to buy a planner. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You can buy the planners in A4 and A5, so you can choose the size that suits you best. The A4 obviously has a lot more space to write in, and it's not a great deal more money. So that could be the best option if you're trying to plan things. It's where the other emojis are. Brilliant. Thank you. I've not tried it myself. We designed them and put them up, but I don't know how to use them. A bit of a technophobe when it comes to that. So thank you very much again for joining me. I'm going to close this live stream now. So have a lovely day or evening wherever you happen to be, and go give your greyhounds a hug. Bye for now.